Welcome. Good evening. I'm Julie Hussey, President of the League of Women Voters of the Charleston Area and the moderator for this evening. Thank you for coming tonight to hear the candidates. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots, non-partisan organization made up of women and men from all political backgrounds. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank our non-partisan co-sponsor, the Charleston branch of the American Association of University Women, for their help in being a part of our event tonight. We would also like to recognize and thank the City of North Charleston for making the council chamber available and ready, as well as Ryan Johnson, who's recording for us and streaming it on the internet. Our thanks to Comcast as well for broadcasting the forum this evening. As reminders, unauthorized taping is not permitted and any recording must always be shown in its entirety. Also, please silence your cell phone if you've not already done so. It is the sincere hope of the co-sponsors that this evening will provide useful information on candidates' positions on critical issues of concern to citizens so that you can cast informed votes in the November 6th election. The first part of this forum was scheduled to be the candidates for the Charleston County Auditor's position. Last week, the League received an email from candidate Paul Garrich saying, "Please allow this email to serve as notice that I will not be available for your planned event on the 24th this month. Based on all that my campaign has been through since winning the primary back in June and all the expenses that we've incurred in our legal battles, we've adjusted our campaign strategy accordingly for the next 3 weeks, and on the 24th I will be attending a function with Governor Haley." This forum was scheduled in August in good faith following confirmation that both candidates would attend. We regret that Mr. Garrich chose at this late date to change plans, leaving voters without an opportunity to hear his views alongside those of Mr. Tecklenburg. We feel this is unfair to voters seeking to cast an informed ballot by being able to ask their questions of the candidates and hear the candidates' views, contrasting and comparing side by side. The League does not hold empty chair forums with only one candidate in attendance, nor does AAUW. Consequently, we are announcing this forum is officially canceled, and remaining faithful to our nonpartisan stance, those League and AAUW members who are non-constituents will leave the room. This time is made available for Mr. Tecklenburg to address voters and answer their questions. The second part of the forum will commence at 7:30 and be dedicated to candidates for South Carolina's 1st Congressional District, United States 1st Congressional District. Thank you. Mr. Tecklenburg?
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the organizing committee for putting this together. My name is Peter Tecklenburg, and I believe that government should be transparent, voters informed, and candidates accountable. This evening, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, who I am as a person, and what I stand for as a candidate. I'll give an opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask me any question. I'm not afraid of tough questions, and I feel that you have the right to know who you're electing. Briefly, so I can get this out of the way, let me say I'm deeply disappointed that my opponent is not here today. Paul chose politics over this event. I look at it differently. I strive to literally serve the public. As a public servant, I believe my key duty is to make sure voters are able to make an informed decision. That is why this event is so important. My opponent ducked his primary debate on the Savage Report. He skipped his opportunity to do the same with me, and tonight, after confirming his participation via email in August, decided it would be better for him to attend an event with Governor Haley. Paul and I have very different philosophies when it comes to this. His campaign has been funded with unregulated political action committee donations and tens of thousands of dollars from contractors working on county projects paid for with taxpayer dollars. I've turned away all PAC contributions, disclosed more than I was required to disclose by law, and made real pledges to run the most open campaign in Charleston County history, and I've kept those pledges. I believe the most open campaign will lead to the most open office. I've made a commitment to see that the auditor's office serve as an example of how a government office should run. You may have heard or read before Robert E. Lee has attributed a quote to him saying, "Duty is the most sublime word in the English language." It's a chilling quote, but above all, it says nothing is greater than one's duty to their family, to their God, and to their country. The duty in this race is to prove total dedication to the position and to provide the voters of Charleston County a complete look at who they are choosing to run in an important aspect of county government. I will say something in a minute about dedication, but I need to get back to introducing myself. I'm proud to come from a long line of Charleston Tecklenburgs that value public service. My roots in this community are deep, and I love this area. As a child, my first home was made in Mount Pleasant. I grew up in the city of Charleston and met my wife at Edisto Island. I like to say I have Pluff mud in my veins. My parents both dedicated a substantial part of their lives to serving others. My father is a critical care physician at MUSC. My mother, Nancy Bloodgood, as a county attorney for many years. It was a combination of both these legacies of community service from the Tecklenburgs and my experience with county government through my mother that led me to the position I am in now. My grandfather, Henry, served as Charleston County Auditor in the early 1960s. A lot has changed since then, but he had a dedication to the people of Charleston County, and I share that as well. I went to Butte Academy until I was in middle school when I switched to parochial school, graduated from Bishop England, traveled up north to Seton Hall University and received my undergraduate degree. I have a bachelor's degree in political science and a minor in diplomacy and international relations. Following graduation, I moved to Columbia and attended the University of South Carolina, where I got my master's degree in public administration. While in graduate school, I worked for Senator Fritz Hollins. Fritz is a good friend, and I'm proud to say I was the fourth generation to work for Fritz, beginning with my great-grandfather, Henry Tecklenburg Sr., who served on the first committee that recruited Fritz to run for State House after the war. My graduate degree is very important. I studied public administration and focused on local government administration and tax policy. The auditor's office needs someone of my training. I have the prerequisites to step in on day one and run the office. I'm married to Stephanie Tecklenburg, who works at Ashley Hall. She's been a board member of the Friends of the Library and active volunteer at the Low Country Food Bank and the Junior League. She's my campaign manager and has been as much a part of this campaign as I have. I currently serve on the Charleston County Constituent School Board, District 10. I have a real passion for schools and for children, and I have enjoyed my time immensely on it. Before serving on the school board, I was a volunteer mentor at James Simmons School downtown. I'm on the board of directors at St. Francis Hospital and have been for the last 5 years. I was my neighborhood association president, served on numerous committees throughout the region, including on transportation, the environment, and regional planning, a member of the Knights of Columbus, and Steph and I are parishioners at St. Mary of the Annunciation Catholic Church downtown. I was named one of Charleston's 40 under 40 by the Charleston Regional Business Journal in 2008, and this year was recognized by a statewide organization for my leadership. Now let me tell you a little bit about the auditor's office. First and foremost, the biggest question I get is, what does the auditor do? And since most folks, including my opponent, are a little confused, let me give you a little background. First, the auditor cannot lower taxes. It's a great slogan, and if you want to run a campaign on confusing voters, in fact, it's a wonderful slogan if you want to run a campaign on confusing voters and never showing up to face them, but it's completely untrue and a disservice to the honest people of Charleston County. To give you a simple answer on the roll, the auditor calculates and processes tax bills, both personal and real property taxes. The municipalities and county council raise and lower taxes. The assessor calculates the value of the properties. The auditor puts it together and sends the bill out, and the treasurer collects it. So the bottom line is the auditor has two very distinct roles: accuracy and timeliness of tax bills. So why is it important who you elect? Well, we've seen the problems that can occur when we have problems in the auditor's office. Late tax bills mean late revenues, and late revenues mean cities and towns have to wait for their money. It might not sound like a big deal, but to tell a town administrator on Sullivan's Island who's trying to meet payroll for his police department, or the mayor of Hollywood who has municipal and town hall bills to pay, imagine if your paycheck was delayed for 2 months. Some of us in this room could float a bill or some use savings, but most of us would get a little nervous. How do we ensure that the bills go out on time? Well, the first step is dedication. We need an auditor who will be there every day. I quit my job to run for this office. It is and will be my only job. I'll repeat that. It is and will be my only job. My opponent believes he can do both, be both auditor and run his current business on the side. We've had enough issues with him mixing his job with his elective service or his elective office, and we must demand a complete dedication to the job. Let me tell you a quick story about dedication. In 7 years in my last job, I missed 1 day for illness. I'm not ashamed to tell you I'm a workaholic, and behind my family, nothing gets in the way of doing the job. When the cell phone rings and I'm sitting at my desk, you can be assured that one thing, it will not be my other job calling. No one will ever question who I work for. Accuracy is the other thing. Accuracy is the other key component to what the auditor does. It's also the biggest single issue I run into when talking to folks. Number one, people do not understand their tax bills. Number two, they are consistently having problems ranging from getting their bills for cars, bills for cars they sold 4 years ago to being charged the wrong millage rate. I can bring a fresh vision to the office and have experience in implementing technology and not afraid of trying innovative ways to fix problems. Accuracy depends on three things: hard work, understanding, and a dedication to see things done correctly. I was recently awarded the endorsement of the Trident Association of Realtors. It is by far the most important endorsement of the race. The Realtors looked at both candidates and felt I was the more prepared candidate and better suited to restore the trust in the office. I value that endorsement. At my previous job, I was charged with seeing federal reporting of civil rights, ADA, and drug and alcohol reporting. Proud to have 100% on-time performance and zero findings in those 7 years. I know about deadlines. I'm ready for this job. I'm dedicated to the job, and I refuse to use it as a springboard for other political office. I bring up politics, and it's an important issue in this race. I've stated from day one, I do not think there's a Democratic or Republican way of doing the job, just the right way. Really, if someone out there knows of a difference that running the office as a Democrat or a Republican could make, please let me know. I've spoken with Democrats and Republicans throughout this campaign. We've gathered support from both. Politics aside, I feel like I'm the more qualified person for the job. It is a reality you need to run under a party label for this office. And I appreciate all the people who've been helping me out, but this is not about politics, it's about service. Paul is not here tonight because he's put a political function above this forum. That's just politics as usual. Let me get back to why you should vote for me. I have the education, I have the commitment, I'm the only candidate who can raise the bar in terms of ethics, and I know the job. I'm also the only candidate with real experience in fixing a government office. Let me explain that a little more. When I got out of grad school, I had the opportunity to begin working for CARTA. I spent the next 7 years working to change what most people considered a failing agency. Together with a small group of others and leadership from a board that knew the importance of good government, we changed CARTA from a floundering agency to a leader in the region. The Brookings Institution recently ranked CARTA as the second most efficient agency in the Southeast. I worked with municipalities throughout Charleston County, both elected officials and staff, and can bring that same level of change to the auditor's office. I'm proud of the progress CARTA has made, the express park and ride routes, the increases from under 1 million passengers to 4.5 million passengers during my time. I'm proud of the changes we made in terms of customer service, which I oversaw, and the commitment to real progress. I still believe it's part of the puzzle for future growth of this region. Let me conclude by saying I ask for your vote. I want us to put partisanship aside and elect the better candidate. I'm young, energetic, led by my values and integrity, but confident enough to know that I can make a difference. I need your vote, and I need your help in telling your friends. I'd be honored to answer any questions now. I know there are a couple folks who may have questions. Yes, sir.
First, I want to congratulate you on your 5 dozen victory in 2010 for the constituent board. And I'd like for you please to talk to us a little bit about the West Ashley High School District, the middle schools, and the elementary schools in our constituent board District 10, please.
I'll talk about it real briefly, and then we can get back to to some of the auditor's questions. Trying to think of a way I can relate it to the auditor's office, but I will tell you this. The schools West Ashley have seen progress. I've only been on the board for 2 years, but I'm a supporter of public schools. I did go to public schools for a while, but I'm also a supporter of good schools and neighborhood schools. And I think it's important that one of the key functions that a society can provide is giving their children the best opportunity to have a good life, and I think that starts with a good education. I'm proud of the progress a lot of the West Ashley schools have made. We have excellent principals. I think West Ashley High School is a school that's becoming better, and I wish I could relate it more to the auditor's race. what other sort of questions can I answer for you guys? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your knowledge about technology, and I think it's an opportunity to maybe talk about the role of technology with CARTA and how you'll bring those competencies into the role of the auditor.
It's a good question. The first thing I need to mention is while I was at CART, I was involved in a couple technological, some big technological changes or unveilings, and we worked through something called Google Transit, which allowed folks to be able to use a mapping software to predict bus routes. We worked on real stop technology to where our buses or our Telluride vans, which do the paratransit service, were able to be tracked by GPS in terms of it allowed us to increase efficiency for something and change the log during that time. Also sat on a board and worked with folks on implementing a new website. So I've been involved in unveiling new technologies in government, and the auditor's office runs, and a lot of the problems that we've had in the last few years have been blamed on technology. I believe I have a better understanding than the current incumbent, Peggy Mosley, does, partially because of a generational difference, but also because I have more experience in the sort of computers and programs that are needed to run the office. Manatron is the name of the system. I was the only candidate who was at the county council hearing or update they had back in August. The only candidate for auditor, and I've been following it closely. The decision to continue with Manatron is not the auditor's decision. It's a decision that county council has made, and I believe that the system is competent enough or is capable of handling the taxes in an organized fashion. And one of the priorities that I'll have when I go into office, number one, of course, is going to be customer service. I think right away we need to deal with that. I've had enough trouble on the phone myself. But number two is we need to make sure everyone in that office is completely familiar with the Manatron system, and I'll ensure that the training is made available for anyone who feels that they need to learn more. Because the first and most important thing is, and while they're still working bugs out, and I've talked to staff members, and they think that we are making progress on that, but one of the things that needs to happen is we need to make sure we have a staff at the auditor's office who understands the system as they should, and I'll make sure that training is made available. Yes, yes, ma'am.
We have a couple of questions from the league and AAUW. I'll give you two of them. What do you think can be put in place to foster better relationships and communication between the auditor's office and the public? And how do you plan to improve collections on delinquent accounts?
Okay, let me take that in two parts because I'll forget. Let me start with the better relations. The first thing that we need an auditor to do, or to change the perception in that office, is we need someone who will tell the truth. And I'm going to come in there, and honesty is obviously going to be one of the hallmarks of trying to change the perception of the auditor's office, but also the perception of government. We need someone who's going to work hard and be straight with the folks. That being said, to better educate folks on the role of the office and also how the office can be helpful to folks, I plan on making sure that every end of this county has some availability with forms, whether I'm having to go out there or have a staff member who goes out to Edisto every 2 weeks or goes out to McClellanville. We need to make sure that every part of Charleston County is covered. In campaigning, I've been to Edisto Island and I've been to McClellanville and I've talked to the folks there. And even though there are service stations in Ravenel and in Mount Pleasant, there are parts of the county where folks need more access to their government services. And a lot of the times it's just being able to answer questions. And so one of the things that I plan on doing is having an office that communicates better. I'm going to make it a top priority in the office to make sure that folks understand what the auditor's office does and how we can be helpful. There are a lot of things the auditor's office can do to lower folks' tax bills, educating folks on the homestead exemption. There are a number of other sort of exemptions and tax rebates that that are more specific, but to POWs and to folks who were wounded in action or service to our country. Those are sort of things that need to be brought up to make sure everyone's taking care of the right sort of things. So communication is the key. An open communication, having a transparent office. On my website, I listed a list of things that I plan on doing. Number one, I'm going to have an open checkbook. Any expense that comes out of the auditor's office is going to get posted on the website. I want everyone to be able to know where the money's going. The number two, if I have any sort of county vehicle, the mileage will be posted monthly. I plan I'm going to decline any out-of-state travel. I don't think there's any reason for the auditor to be going on boondoggles or trips out to Tampa or somewhere else. I'm going to do whatever I got to do to stay inside the state. And if I do have to go outside the state, I'm going to pay it for it with my own dollars. I don't think the taxpayers of Charleston County should be in the business of making me a tourist. Getting to the second part of your question, what can the auditor do to make sure to increase revenue? Is that or the collection?
Increase collection rates.
Okay. First, on delinquent accounts. Okay. First of all, the auditor's office doesn't directly deal with that. The treasurer, as soon as I'll try to not be blunt here, but as soon as the tax bill gets sent out, it's sort of the treasurer's job and the delinquent tax office's job to figure out whether or not or whose problem it is. But the auditor has a major role in that. And it goes back to accuracy. We have to make sure the tax bills are correct. We have to make sure that folks are paying what they're supposed to pay, and that goes not only for making sure folks are not being overcharged, but also making sure that folks who are not living in a primary residence are not getting that assessment, or making sure that folks who own a large boat are being taxed if they are here for the amount of time. It's a complicated issue, but the key is that we have to have an auditor in there who understands the role, and that's something I can bring to the office. Yes, ma'am. Currently, there are 30 or 31 employees in the auditor's office. That's in their budget. I don't think there's any need to increase that. I think efficiency is important, and I'd like to find efficiency in every way I can in the office. But I think ultimately the most important thing is that the office is providing the service that the taxpayers are paying for, and that when Carter was ranked the second most efficient agency in the Southeast, what they're saying is when someone was handing over their dollar, whether it's the taxpayer, or whether it's through federal grants or whatever, Carter ranked second in getting the most bang for the buck. Well, that's the sort of thing we need for the auditor's office. I want to make sure we get the most bang for the buck, and that's good service. That's making sure it's effective and goes back to accuracy and timeliness of the tax bills. But there are about 30 employees currently. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a full-time auditor now?
Well, we pay for a full-time auditor, and I think Peggy is a full-time auditor now. She's had some questionable periods of when she was actually going to work. But yes, it's supposed to be a full-time job. We have a full-time coroner, we have a full-time auditor, we have a full-time treasurer. That's the expectation. Now, it's just like a lot of other elected positions in the fact that the auditor does not answer necessarily to county council. They get a budget from them. They don't have to turn in their timesheets. They answer to the voters of Charleston County. And so it's important that we have someone who takes the role seriously. Yes, we do have a full-time auditor now, although there have been times where she hasn't been so much full-time. Other questions? I can answer anything. I can also make football predictions or anything else. Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone their attention and the fact that you're here tonight. I think says a lot about wanting to make an informed decision. I ask that you please visit my website, which is www.tech2012.com. There's a lot of information on there. I don't think a candidate should be judged by their website necessarily, but I certainly think my website's better than my opponent's. And so go to his website. I think it's Gowrich for Auditor, if you can spell that right. And put them side by side and try to make a decision. Because I think ultimately, and that's why I'm here tonight, we have to be able to make informed decisions. And I appreciate all the attention. Thank you, guys.
Now it's the switcho changeo. We're back. Okay. Now I would like to welcome you as the president of the League of Women Voters of the Charleston Area to the Forum for South Carolina's 1st Congressional District. The candidates are Mr. Keith Blanford, Libertarian Party candidate, and I'll let him come up and sit down, and Ms. Bobby Rose, Democratic Party candidate. Also, Representative Tim Scott, incumbent and Republican Party candidate. Unfortunately, Representative Scott had a previous scheduled community event in Colleton River Plantation in Bluffton from 5:30 to 7:30 this evening, and is consequently unable to attend this forum. My role tonight, and I'm explaining it to you and to you, is to keep the dialogue going and to ensure that both of you adhere to the strict timeline. Our timekeeper will signal the candidates about their remaining time and when time is up. The format for tonight's forum with candidates is as follows. The candidates will be called upon alphabetically for introductory remarks of 90 seconds or less. After opening statements, candidates will each have up to 90 seconds to respond to an opening question from the forum co-sponsors. We will then ask questions that have been submitted by audience members, and this is the part where you need to get to work. So start filling out your questions and turning them in so we can get them. Every candidate has an equal time to answer each question, so questions should be of a general nature. If you have a specific question, it should be balanced with an alternative to allow each candidate to address the topic. Should you wish to submit a question, volunteers are around the room, David back there, with note cards and pens. Please raise your hand and a volunteer will bring them or pick up a question. These questions are then sorted by members of the sponsoring organization for clarity or duplication. Just want to make sure that we're not asking the same question twice. Candidates have the option of providing an additional 60-second comment after initial responses to a question are given. Please signal me if you wish to do so. Finally, each candidate will have 60 seconds for closing remarks. Closing comments will be presented in reverse order from the opening remarks sequence. To ensure that both of our candidates have a fair and equal amount of time to respond to questions, we will ask the audience to hold your applause until the end of the forum. We also request that you refrain from making comments during the candidates' remarks. Now, for opening statements, we begin with Mr. Blanford. Yep.
And you can hear me? Okay, so here we go. So clearly, there's a lot of trouble we have on a federal level, clearly. You know, my generation is facing debts that we cannot repay. We're facing a world that they continue to go around and being aggressive and kicking it like a hornet's nest, so that we're going to have a lot of enemies, you know, when we step up. I think it's really important for us to kind of let go of these identities that we have built around political this, political that, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, and we really, really need to make an effort to come together. We have to make an effort to find something that we have as common ground. I think one of the things that we can really talk about in limiting the size and scope of government, and if it's something you don't like or you do, is Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, which does not allow the government to create money out of thin air. Whatever it is that you think government can achieve, the more money that we print, the further away we'll get from it. I really think that this is something that we can get around as a society, as Americans, and find a solution. And that's really what I look for. You know, when I talk to children and I talk to schools, you know, I really never talk about political parties or even what office I'm running for. It's just the idea that we have the power. You know, it really is to me that if you want to change politics, you look in the mirror. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
Good evening. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the AAUW for hosting this event. I'm Bobby Rose. I was born and raised in a blue-collar home. My father was a coal miner in Western Virginia, and then he became a construction worker, and we ended up in Charleston, South Carolina when I was 10 years old. And our first day here, we went to Folly Beach, and we all saw the ocean for the first time. And that was an amazing experience, and I knew right then that anything was possible and that this was my home. And now I've taken a winding road through teaching and brokering and real estate and child advocacy that brought me from that beach to this stage. And I'm running to be the representative of the 1st Congressional District because right now we don't have one. We have a congressman, but we do not have a representative. And I am upset that he is not here tonight. Not because he's my opponent, but because he is my congressman. And to answer questions from his constituents is his job. So basically, Tim Scott did not show up to work today. Thank you.
Now, candidates have 90 seconds to respond to this question from the forum's co-sponsors. How can the federal government, in collaboration with other levels of government, provide an equitable, quality public education for all children, pre-K through grade 12? And we will start with Ms. Rose.
Thank you. Well, I believe one of the first things we need to do is when federal money is offered to the state, we need to figure out a way for our state representatives to accept the money. And in the past, that hasn't always happened. But I do think education is very important, and on the federal level, we can do more by, I'm a big advocate of universal pre-K, and that would be on the federal level. And I think that would level the playing field. Some states are very good with providing a quality education, and some are not. And it is unfair to children in states that are not as effective at providing education to allow those children to fall through the cracks. So I believe early education paid for by the federal government is a good way to try to level that playing field at the young age. Thank you.
Mr. Blanford?
I think that's the key to it, is the federal government pay. Anytime I hear the federal government pay, I think, how? How can they pay? There's $16 trillion in debt. They haven't had a balanced budget in 3 years. Anything they do, they print money to do. That means that the money that you have saved your entire life is devalued. What's the role of the federal government in our education of our children? None. There is no role of the federal government. There is no constitutional authority that says the federal government can do that one way or the other. And the best way for me to raise my child is for me to raise my child. I don't want the federal government involved in my child. So I think the best thing that the federal government can do is, one, balance their budget, because the biggest threat that we have to our children is the debt. How are we going to pay for this? The baby boomers have spent more money than any generation in the history of mankind, and they're not done. How are we going to pay for this? So you want the federal government to do more in education? It's not right, and you cannot continue to indebt your children. So I think personally there is no role for the federal government, and that we as a community can come together and teach our children much better than someplace up in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. You would like to have 60 seconds to come back?
Thank you. I would just like to say that studies have proven that the return on investment for early education depending on the study, $7 to 1 or $15 to 1. So this is an investment in the future. And that's just, we're just talking dollars there. That doesn't include the quality of life of that child who now has a fighting chance throughout their school career. I think it's important for the federal government to invest in Americans. I think that's the most important investment we can make. Thank you.
Thank you. You'd like to come back as
Yeah,
well?
please. I think, and I understand that, and I think it's important to understand that I love my daughter, and I want the best for her, and it's not like, I feel like I should wear a T-shirt that says another heartless libertarian, It's not the case, Where is the federal authority in the Constitution? It may sound good, we may want to do it, but where is the authority? The Constitution, if you typed it out in Word, it wouldn't be but 7 pages? There is no power. Now the state, now yeah, we may have the ability there to come together. Say we wanted higher education and we wanted to make universities free. The state of South Carolina could get together and we could decide to do that. Maybe North Carolina doesn't want to. But on a federal level, there is no authority in the Constitution, which apparently we don't look at anymore, for us to be able to have a Department of Education or any involvement in education of our children.
Oh, thank you very much. I've got so many good questions up here. I'm trying to figure out what to ask next. You've talked a lot about education, so I think we might go forward on that. And let's start with Mr. Blanford. What are key steps you feel must be taken regarding education so that we can continue to compete globally?
Well, it's kind of a redundant question. It's the same thing. I think, for us as a society, we need to take a real good look at the role of society and the role of government in our lives. I think that a lot can be done at the parent level, in what we believe and in our churches and other communities, and not take parenting and put it into the responsibility of the government. It doesn't work. It never has. And we do have things that we have to deal with, like propaganda and things that they teach our children. So a big thing that we can do also to improve is to make sure that these children aren't encumbered with a lot of debt. Clearly, these guys come out of university with so much student loan debt, they're indentured servants before they even come out. So if it's something that states want to consider to provide higher education, we should talk about it. But first and foremost, we have to have the discussion, not about whether we like it or want it, whether it's good or bad, whether there's a return on the investment. We have to pay for it now, right now. There is no money. There is no money. So on the state level is where we need to handle these things, not on the federal level. The federal government doesn't have any business in it. Thank you.
Ms. Rose?
Could you repeat that?
Yes, I can. The question was, what are key steps you feel must be taken regarding education so that we can continue to compete globally?
Well, we need to, first of all, we need to create training, more training centers, and stop looking at education as a one track. Not every child can, wants to, or needs to attend college, and we need to recognize that we can train these students to lead productive lives and to find jobs that pay a living wage. We also need to make sure that we're funding our STEM courses, and that we are creating schools and paying teachers enough to stay interested and recruiting teachers with enough experience by treating them well and paying them well to teach these STEM technology courses and those kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Let's go on to something else. I do have a bunch of questions on education from the audience, so we'll try to come back to those, but let's try some other questions as well. What do you think the most critical issue this congressional district will face in the next 2 years, and how will you address it? And we'll start with Ms. Rose.
I think the most critical issue is the one we have faced the last 2 years, and that's the gridlock in Washington and the lack of bills being passed that need to be passed, and the fact that we're not getting anything done. And when bills can't be passed, we don't progress, and that is not the way that our government system was created to work. So if we don't elect congressmen and women who are willing to go and reach across the aisle and compromise and do not go and take a pledge to take raising revenue off the table, which sort of makes any compromise fall apart, then we'll be in trouble the next 2 years, just like the last 2 years have been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you repeat it for me? My
Yes.
mind just blanked.
No, I'm happy to. What do you think is the most critical issue this congressional district will face in the next 2 years, and how will you address it?
Okay, so the baby boomers are retiring now. Now, it's happening. And the empire is cutting coins. Now, throughout history, empires, how they pay for their bills, right? And you're going to hear me say this a lot of times tonight, so get used to it. You know, they print money, right? So right now, the empire, the American empire, in order to pay its bills, is printing money. This is the biggest issue of my generation's time, because Russia did it, and they were in Afghanistan, and they devalued their currency. World War II, Germany devalued their currency. We are devaluing our currency. Now, we can talk back and forth about education all day, but the reality is it's going to take a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread, and that's what we're looking for in our future. We're paying $40 billion a month to bail out the banks. You know, where's this money coming from? Are we collecting this much in taxes? No, we're not. What about my mom, who's going to go on Social Security for, let's say, just roughly $200 a month? If you print money forever, that $200 is going to be $100. You know, people on fixed income are in real trouble. So we're sitting here talking about things that are upper level. It's downstream of where the conversation needs to be. We need to stop this. It has to stop. So this is what I think is the biggest issue. We believe that we can go in, work with competing currency laws, get an audit of the Federal Reserve, and stop it. And then we can start moving forward on ideas that we want for our children and for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question goes directly to what you said, Ms. Rose, but also I think that the things that you said, Mr. Blanford, would be connected to this question as well. To pass effective legislation, it's important to do it. It's possible that you could be doing it against partisan gridlock, which makes it nearly impossible. How do you plan to work with your colleagues in Congress to put voters first and pass legislation that will help our country? And we will start with Mr. Blanford.
Okay. And I think, you know, for us, we have different philosophies of government, and I don't despise a man or a woman for having different ideas, you know, and I can accept that, and I can listen, and I can hear you. But I do think that we have a lot more in common than people think, and that's where we can resonate. You know, as far as the philosophies of government and ideal living and this and that, that's not what I'm thinking about. I do really, really want to do well. I want to have a good life, and I want to give that to my child. So when I talk about what I talk about with currency, I really believe that that's something that we can all get aboard with, you know. And for me, in Congress, and what is that role in my life, you know, I want to go up there and fix it, and then people who come after me, they can discuss these things. But right now, I think that we can work together if we really identify the problem. How much do we see on TV and each other where people are junkies for the problem, and they're not talking about any solutions. Nobody's offering any solutions. So we come out and we say, look, we have to fix this. It's the currency, clearly, and nobody wants to hear it. Do we just want to talk about the problem? So it's me, you know, I really do want to do this. And clearly, from my perspective, I'm small government. There's not a lot of small government people. I'm going to have to. So, and I've done it, and I've got experience in it, and I'll continue to do it for the rest of my life, whether it's in government or if it's out there working. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
Well, I believe I was a broker, so I know that I can sit across the table from people with very different ideas of what they want to see the end income and come up with solutions, because we all basically are looking for the same thing at the end of the day. We want a solution that works for all of us. I think what's happening in the current Congress is they do not want a solution at all. And when that happens, it's impossible to sit at the table and make anything work. When the agenda is one thing, which is making President Obama a one-term president, then everything else falls to the side. And when they say we will not put raising revenue on the table at all, then it's just difficult to get anything done. But I can absolutely work across the aisle with anyone as long as we're focusing on the same agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to try a new question, a different direction. For over a decade, the U.S. has fought 2 wars, which have been costly. Now, some in Washington are talking aggressively about Iran. What is your position on a potential war with Iran? And we will start with you, Ms. Rose.
I absolutely think war has to be the last resort. I am opposed to war with Iran. I believe the sanctions are working, and I think that's the road we need to continue along, because we are war weary and we are war broke, and I think we need to stay out of Iran.
Mr. Blanford.
And so I was in the Navy, and I guarantee you, Marines are the Marines, but I guarantee the Marines could take Iran in 18 days. They'd wipe it out. This idea of Iran being a threat to us is the most ludicrous nonsense. So what are they going to do? They're going to develop their busted-up 1968 technology, then they're going to mass produce that, and they're going to fire it at our country against the best missile system, defense system in the world. They're going to load on their ships, and they're going to come and invade South Carolina. We're going to run around saying the Iranians are coming. Oh, I mean, what nonsense. And the idea that one of the best intelligence communities in the world, which happens to be Israel, number 1 Russia, number 2 Israel, doesn't have somebody standing right beside the guy who's working on the bomb is nonsense. Do you think that a nuclear-capable Israel is going to allow Iran to be nuclear capable? No way. They'll blast them off the face of the earth. This is nonsense. It's war propaganda. You know, they're going to get people killed. My wife is Russian. Do you think Russia and China is going to sit by while we go into Iran? They're not. And this is over the dollar. The first country to leave the dollar to the euro was Iraq. We invaded them. The next one who manipulated their currency was Libya. They wanted gold currency. And now what's going on in Iran? They want to leave the dollar to go to gold. And they're going to stop them. People don't need to die for this. And sanctions? How many children died in Iraq because of our sanctions? 500,000 children. Do you think that you would hate them? This needs to stop. It needs to stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of keep a little bit on that, and that we have a question that says, currently there's a threat of oh, I should have picked this one up. Anyway, sequestration. Thank you. What will you do if elected to ensure that our country won't have to go through this process? And we will start, I think it's time to start with Mr. Blanford.
You got to, the word that you said a bunch of times is you got to give it to me. You got to actually define it. I mean, that's how much I'm unfamiliar with it. Sequestrate, what? It sounds like a horse.
It does sound like a horse. I don't think this is about horses. What this is about is the idea that the money will be held for funding the military, and that we will not be giving them the money until that's just how we're going to balance some of our budget, is to not.
So we're going to cut military spending?
We're going to cut military spending.
Well, we have to. Okay, so I mean, I can start. Hit the button. So we have to. We don't have a choice. You know, most of these things. Look at the Soviet Union. So where was the last place that they invaded? Afghanistan. Where are we? Afghanistan. Where did Alexander the Great stop? Afghanistan. Where did the British Empire stop? Afghanistan. This is nonsense. You know, so the idea that the military can't be cut. I mean, either we're going to cut it voluntarily, or the free market's going to do it for us, one way or the other. You cannot create money out of thin air to pay your bills. As an individual, can you go into your basement and print money and pay your bills? No. So why can a group of individuals come together and do it? They can't. So there's absolutely no way that we can sustain the current military. If you put our budget together, we have a bigger military than all the other militaries in the world. And I'm Navy. My family's been Navy so long, there's an HMS Blanford. You know, but it's to provide for the common defense. I will defend your lives with mine. defend, not offense. Most of this, what we're paying for, is offense, and it's killing people, and it needs to stop. And this is the problem, because, the GOP's got their little pet projects over there to go around the world and dominate, and the other one's got theirs for nationalizing industry. We can't afford either, and it needs to stop, and either we're going to address it or it's going to stop for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
Sequestration was the major, huge threat that the government used to try to force members of Congress to come together and talk about the budget and deficit reduction. It was a threat that did not work because so many members of Congress had taken the Norquist Pledge and refused to put raising revenue on the table, which is an integral part of our government. Budget balancing can't be done without both cutting and raising revenue. So that threat came into place, and it is due to take effect January 2nd. And I've been telling people for the last 4 or 5 months, call your representative, tell them to go back to the table and put raising revenue back on the table and forget this pledge taken to an unelected official. It's holding our country hostage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford, would like to come back?
I think that the idea that needs to be discussed is this balancing of the budget, when it comes to military or any other. They run on a deficit now, and how they deal with that deficit is through bonds, and they sell them. And we allow a private bank, the Federal Reserve, to print money, our money, and buy those own bonds and make money off of it. So what incentive? There's a moral hazard. Why would a congressman ever consider balancing a budget when they know that they can print money to make up for the deficit? So, we can talk about balancing the budgets from whatever perspective. May it be education, it can be from healthcare, it can be from war. But the reality is that they're not going to do it because they've got no reason to do it. We need to take back the power as the people, look at the Constitution, and limit their ability to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to some more questions, just kind of keeping in the same international vein, and talk about, with an increased number of soldiers coming back with PTSD and later finding themselves jobless, what is your plan to address both these problems? And we will start with Ms. Rose, I think. Is that the opposite of what we did before?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to keep up with it.
Well, I will absolutely do whatever I can to support the veterans returning home. They come home needing services and deserving services, and these are services that they have earned, and I think that's sometimes what people forget. They have earned these services. And my opponent enthusiastically supported the Ryan budget, which cuts by $11 billion services to veterans, and I will absolutely never support a budget that does not support our veterans. We need to address the fact we need to help I was at the VA hospital and I was told that they don't have the services because there is such a tremendous influx coming in of people with these specific needs, and these are long-term needs. And I will sponsor legislation to make sure we have funds available to do whatever we need to do for our veterans returning home. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
Yeah, I do believe that's also a role of government, that we are required to provide for the common defense, and that we should be committed to the people who did that, regardless of, how they're using the troops. People like me who served, we served. And it really is appropriate for us to follow through on that and make sure they're okay and make sure they get the health care they need. And I know people, I actually work with people who are suffering, from it. And I saw things myself, and yes, we need to address it as a culture, and it is a function of government. Now, to unpack the question, there's also something I heard in there about job creation. And I need to make it very clear that the United States government or any government does not create jobs. Men like me create jobs. I have a business. I hire people, right? The government doesn't do anything. And anything that the government produces, they take from somebody else. So if they're going to pay a salary to somebody else, they take it from men like me. I'm not saying I'm unwilling, But we need to make sure that we understand that concept, that the government creates nothing. We do, right? So if we're going to do job creation, then it's probably best to let men like me do it instead of getting in our way and having more regulations, more difficult, more permits, more licenses. You know how many people I know who are a better builder than I am, but they can't pass a license exam? I mean, it's just impossible now to make a living. So we need to get the government out of the way so we can increase the amount of jobs available to these men. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to one more question I think that we have international, and that is, will you support defunding all non-embassy troops in countries that do not support U.S. presence? And we will start with Mr. Blanford.
What? So the question, will I support somebody that doesn't like us? Like, I mean, so you're saying that, yeah, clarify.
It's my understanding. The question is, will you support defunding all non-embassy troops in countries that do not support a U.S. presence?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this idea of, okay, here we are, our unemployment rate's crazy. People are literally, out of their homes. We're dealing with a real live depression, essentially. And we're still giving foreign aid to other countries? We're still providing defense for Germany? Against who? The Russians? Their stuff is older than me. Japan? Why are we doing this? So the idea that we're borrowing money from China and then we're actually going and giving it to a country that doesn't even like us, what kind of nonsense is that? And I'm the one sitting here looking at these bills. So in order to do it, we're devaluing our currency. We're making people angry all over the world. We have a diplomatic. I've been all over the world, and most people don't not like Americans, but they hate our government. There's no doubt. And what for? So because we're trying to influence and manipulate the world. We don't know any better than it. In some countries, I went over to Russia, they actually have shovels older than our country. Who are we to tell them how to live their lives? So the idea for us to be borrowing money to fund other people. I remember they were borrowing money from China to promote job growth in Afghanistan. What is this? What is happening? So we really need to take a good look at what we're doing and who we're funding and why. And can we afford it? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose? I will. Will you support defunding all non-embassy troops in countries that do not support a U.S. presence?
If I understand the question correctly, I will not support pulling troops out. I think I would go on a case-by-case basis. I don't look at the rest of the world in the same way. I think every country has specific issues and specific needs, and we have specific information on that country, and I would not make a blanket statement that I would or would not support that. I would talk with advisors and people that have experience and that have knowledge, and then I would make a determination on a case-by-case and country-by-country basis. Thank you.
All right, let's go on. Something that came up about the jobs. So I thought I would bring up this one. Minorities have always faced double-digit unemployment and high levels of poverty. What is your plan to address these issues? And we will go to Ms. Rose.
First of all, we need to make sure our education system is fair for everyone. And that doesn't mean giving vouchers and tearing our schools apart. I think we really should acknowledge that how we educate our children and workers for the future will determine whether we can grow and prosper together or remain divided due to inequality of education, which equals inequality of opportunity. And that's what we're seeing. I think it has to start at the education level. We also need to, once again, training programs so that every path doesn't need to go to college, and use those programs to train workers in jobs that pay a living wage, and that's a very important point. We need to create jobs that pay enough that families can take care of themselves so that everyone doesn't have to work 2 or 3 of them. And when we allow companies to pay such a low wage that workers still qualify for food food programs and food stamps, then what we are doing are subsidizing those corporations, and that is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
You got to give it to me again.
Okay, I will. Minorities have always faced double-digit unemployment and high levels of poverty. What is your plan to address these issues? And I'm going to throw one on here a little bit, just because Ms. Rose talked about it. But do you think the minimum wage should be increased? Because I think I heard you say that you did. No.
Whatever you want to say.
I kind of threw two questions in here.
Not
okay.
in so many words. I mean, we
Okay.
could talk about that.
Then why don't we talk about it after this, but then let me go ahead and go with this first question. Sorry, I was trying to use up as many questions, I guess. Minorities have always faced double-digit unemployment and high levels of poverty. What is your plan to address these issues?
I think this revisits the question of the role of society and the role of government, and can government actually create jobs? So, what is my plan personally? It's to continue to be successful in my business, and I do hire a lot of minorities. I think from a governmental perspective, the best thing that we can do for minorities is to really take a good look on the war on drugs and what it's done to our society, what it's done to people, how it is disproportionately discriminatory versus minorities, how people with minor drug charges are spending, 55 years in jail and getting an education in bad places. So I think that one of the best things that we can do to address the disparities for minorities in this country is to address that. The war on drugs has been an utter failure, and it's put a lot of people in jail that probably just needed some counseling or needed to be talked to about health care, or this is not good for your life, or just go to church. But the idea of incarcerating somebody for this nonsense has really affected disproportionately minority people.
Thank you very much. Well, I tipped my hat on the next question then. Do you think that minimum wage should be increased? And we'll start with you, Mr. Blanford.
It's a concept that doesn't work. I mean, it's I don't know if it's Keynesian. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but it's called price control. When you fix a price, then you get a disproportional, or you get malinvestment. So essentially, people won't produce whatever it is anymore because they can't afford to produce it. So if you say you fix the price of socks at $5, well, nobody's going to buy it because they can't afford it, and nobody's going to produce it because it costs too much to make. So the idea of trying to fix anything like that doesn't work. It's proven to be unsuccessful. And we've tried it here in the United States a few times, and it doesn't work. Another thing that I notice about setting the minimum wage is that it discourages people like me from giving people a start. If I only have a little bit of money, and I know I've got a little bit of money on this job, and I want to hire somebody, but I can only pay them, I don't know, $5 an hour, but they don't have to work all day, and they just got to pick up trash, I'll never do it because I can't. It's against the law. So I actually think that when we set those things, we actually discourage a lot of hiring for people. There's kids out there now who are actually volunteering to work for free. So if I could give them something, that's better than nothing. So I really think that that's just a basic law of economics that we're trying to break, and it never works. But, it's not a matter of opinion. People really have to take a look at economics and see if that's a failed policy or not, and it is. It's failed.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
I do believe we should raise the minimum wage. I think corporations are taking advantage of high unemployment by pushing down wages, and I think we need to grow our middle class, and to grow our middle class, they need to make enough money to live on and have a little left over. That's the only way it works. Grow the middle class and you grow the economy. Trickle down does not work. It's never worked. But the middle class are our biggest producers, demanders and producers. And when we grow the middle class by paying them a living wage and paying them enough that they have a little left over, that's how we grow the economy, and that will make the economy strong.
Thank you. Response?
And I think it's important to try to pull the emotion out of it and just think of the basic laws, just like a law of gravity, okay? So look at a car, a GM, right? If you're paying, I build things too, so you just do the math and see if you can make any money on it. If you're paying your labor, I don't know, $75, $100 an hour, and it's costing you $10,000 to make an $8,000 car, you're not going to be able to continue to make that car. So not only are the people who are dependent on that work not going to continue to work, you're not going to hire anybody else either. So you're literally going to stop creating cars, you're not going to be competitive, and you're not going to hire new people. We just have to look at the basic laws of math. I mean, it just doesn't work. So if we're going to create a product that's competitive, then people have to accept that where they are and what they've learned and the knowledge that they have has value. You get paid for the value that you can produce. That's just economics. Thank you.
Ms. Rose?
If it costs $10,000 to make, it would not be an $8,000 car. It could be a $12,000 car. If the employees were making enough money to pay for it, it would be a $12,000 car. The value would be higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to another question. Considering our current national debt, what are your thoughts regarding areas in which spending must remain as a priority? In what ways do you think the federal government should raise those revenues? We'll start with Ms. Rose. Okay. That's it. Considering our current national debt, what are your thoughts regarding areas in which spending must remain as a priority? In what ways do you think the federal government should raise the revenues?
I think our veterans must remain a priority. I think that's money that we have to spend. I think those receiving Social Security, they have to be assured that that will be there. It will not be privatized. It will be there. That's an insurance program for these people, and they deserve it, and that it will be there. And to do that, I would raise the cap on Social Security to $200,000 or more, but I think $200,000 would keep it solvent for 73 years, even accounting for the incoming people that would qualify. I think Medicare will have to remain a priority, and that the Affordable Care Act will help fund that program. Those are what I consider priorities, and of course I consider defense a priority, but I do think that there are many places we could cut in the defense program, and that is not to be confused with the veterans, taking care of our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
From a federal perspective, and we have to get away of the idea whether it's constitutional or not, I do believe that priorities are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. There are people who have paid into these systems their entire lives. And my generation and people like me are very willing to continue to pay for that because there is no money that they've saved still there. It's actually coming from us. And I'm very willing to continue to fund those programs, and I think that the generations below us should have the opportunity to opt out. Now, how are we going to pay for those fundings? We remove our bases from around the world. We have something like 900 bases around the world. We have Germany sitting there over there telling us how wonderful their form of government is, but they don't pay for national defense. We do. So we can fund these things if we pull back our international presence. Not only will we save a good deal of money, but we'll increase the perspective of Americans around the world. They don't like us, and I don't blame them. So I really do think it's important for us to try to sustain the programs that were developed for the boomers, and I think there are a lot of people that are willing to do that. But we have to really take a good look on whether we can continue to do these programs, because most people my age do not believe that Social Security is going to be there for us. That's nonsense. But for the people who've paid into it, we're very willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of phrase this question a little bit. Do you support cutting taxes with the current thing? And if so, who and where do you see that coming up? So will be the first part of this question. And we will start with Mr. Blanford.
I do. I think that what we need to look at very closely is the year 1913. So 1913, a bunch of rich families it's what Occupy talks about all the time, the 1%. A bunch of rich families got together and they formed a bank, a private bank, called the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve actually took over the ability to create currency. This is the third time that it's happened in our country. Andrew Jackson stopped it once, Thomas Jefferson stopped it once, but they did create it in 1913. At the same time, they created the IRS. Most of the money that we pay in income tax is actually to pay for finance charges on our own money. So they create our money, and we borrow it from them, and we get charged for our life efforts to pay back money to this bank. So to me, if we can get our currency back to the free market where it belongs, then we won't need as much taxes to pay the Federal Reserve. Take a look. Just see how much we actually pay these people. Or, okay, say we don't want to do that. We can use that revenue in better places like Social Security or Medicaid. The idea that we're paying this private bank to create our own currency and we're financing it is nonsense. It is criminal. It is probably the most criminal thing that we have running as a country. And we've stopped it before. And why is this conversation off the table? You know, how many people would rather put their money towards education or things that they would rather use than paying these few rich bankers money on our own money? It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
Was the question, would I cut taxes?
Yes. Do you see any need to cut taxes, and if so, where?
I do not
Okay.
see any need to cut taxes. I would allow the tax cuts to expire on those making $250,000 or more, because I think everybody needs to pay their fair share of taxes, and that's not happening. I would close corporate loopholes, but no, I would not cut taxes.
Okay, I'm going to, now, thank you. I'm going to take this question because we've set it up. So if, how do we fix the economy? With your tax plan, how do we fix the economy? Or do you feel like your tax plan affects the economy? And we will start with Ms. Rose.
Well, unlike my opponent, I do think the government creates jobs. And I think we need to address what I consider a very big issue in this country, which is our crumbling infrastructure. We need to address the fact that we need roads, we need bridges, we need schools, we need infrastructure upgraded, or we will not be able to compete in the future. And it's simple. The government spends, although I prefer to say invest. Workers earn. The government gets a return, and we reap the benefits of these projects. Our children and our grandchildren reap the benefits, as we're reaping the benefits of these projects that our grandparents did. And we must address that, and these are jobs that pay a living wage, and like I said, grow the middle class and you grow the economy. And that's the way it works, and that's how I would address the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
I got Tim Scott's like representative. They even left. So I lost the question. I'm completely lost.
All right, and I want to make sure, you might have to help me answer, because the question that I received, and maybe if we can go back to this, but I guess the question is, if you are, how would your tax policy fix the economy?
I haven't created an entire tax. I mean, probably the best person that I think that came up with a good tax plan was Ron Paul, and I really am a proponent of that. You know, clearly there's a difference in philosophies on what we think we think the role of government is in the role of society. So, you know, I believe that people, when a government doesn't develop revenue, so if, like, say you say the government's going to put $1 trillion of revenue into the system, well, they took $1 trillion out to get it. So I actually believe that, you know, decreasing taxes as much as possible on people will be a more effective way of increasing the economy, because they can spend the money how they want. I mean, the idea of TARP alone, so look at that. The government takes it from people, and people are losing their houses, so they give it to banks, and the banks actually come in, get funded for the asset, and take the asset from the people. I mean, don't you think that it would be better served if they didn't have the money to do that in the first place? I mean, to me, the concept that government, you know, the best thing that government can do throughout history, not just the United States, I mean, look at Rome, look at Greece, is the government needs to stay out of the way. We're human beings. We know what we're doing. We're born with it, you know, and I think this idea that, you know, human beings are inherently wicked is nonsense. You know, human beings are inherently good, and in my opinion, government is inherently wicked. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to a new subject, and we will start with Mr. Blanford. What is your position on nuclear energy and green energy?
You know, I'm actually an environmental scientist with a minor in chemistry and biology. I'm also a lead professional, and having been around the world, I have found that environmental policy is a luxury of nations that can afford it. You know, and I know people get really sick of my spiel, but it really does come back to economics, you know, and as we continue to destroy and undermine our economy and our currency, these things will be a second thought to people. You know, there has been and there continues to be the idea of land stewardship in this country, but it does start to take the back burner as people get concerned for feeding their children. You know, it's a terrible analogy, but, you know, if your child is starving, are you going to kill the last spotted owl to eat her? Yeah, you are, you know. With nuclear energy, you know, I think that's a toughie because there's a lot of different forms of nuclear energy, and the government picks the winners and the losers, and there's a lot of, you know, environmental fallout for producing it. But, you know, I think that we have a lot to improve there. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I've seen it, and I think that we can, as a group as people, we can come together, investigate it, and do better. We can do better. And I think that in the long run, it will produce a lot less pollution than the forms that we're using now. So I would support continuing researching for nuclear power.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
I wouldn't say across the board that I'm opposed to nuclear power, but I'm very wary of the potential for disaster. I think we can't afford not to look at alternative energy sources. Environmentally, what we're doing is a disaster. And we have to look at solar and wind, and these are very real alternatives. And of course, they're costing a lot up front. Like any business, the cost is up front. But we're reaping real benefits, and we can't just keep pulling fossil fuels out of the earth and polluting our air. I'm opposed to offshore drilling. I'll throw in my opponents in favor of offshore drilling off the coast of Charleston, off the coast of Beaufort, and I think that would be a disaster. I mean, if everybody can think back to what happened 2 years ago and think if that happened in Charleston, what a disaster economically, environmentally, for tourism, in every way. So we really have to start addressing alternative energy sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, a couple more. What is your opinion of legislation that impacts civil liberties in the name of security? For example,
Nice.
NDAA and the Patriot Act. And we will start with Bobby Rose.
That's tough. Because security is an important issue, but I am not in favor of allowing security to trump our civil liberties. I'm just opposed to those issues. And that's probably something we'll agree on. Maybe the only thing tonight, but something we'll agree on. Thank you.
Mr. Blanford?
You know, I remember going around to, I did a lot of stuff with the GOP, and I ran around to the different Tea Party events and how small government they are and all this sort of stuff. And our legislator voted for the NDAA Section 1021. The NDAA Section 1021 allows the military to come into your home and to take you away without due process if they label you a threat to national security. And your person isn't always going to be in office. Your boy isn't always going to be the leader. So, you know, if it's a Republican, then the Democrats may be a threat to national security. This is a reality, and this person who said that they are a Tea Party patriot voted for it. This is something right out of the Nazis. The Nazis came into people's home with the military and took them away. And we are doing this in the United States of America, and I tell you one thing, a man like me, come to my house, try it, because I'm going to take a few with me. This is where we are on civil liberties. The Patriot Act actually gives the government the ability to spy on us without a warrant. They don't have to do any of the due processes of law. So they can, like my brother who lives in France, they can listen to that conversation because I may be a threat. We're American citizens, and the government is completely and totally out of control. We are all about civil liberties. That's why we started this country in the first place. And no matter what your political perspective is, men and women have died to give us the rights that we have. You know, and for these representatives who are bought and sold, that won't even bother to come in here and give us their voice, to vote for stuff like that, you know, they need to be accountable for it. And I tell you what, we are. I am the future, and we don't forget stuff like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rose, did you answer that question? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm starting to get questions, and we're getting the time. We want to be sensitive to the time as well, because we're Comcast is airing this on Monday night. Please share your view on the Violence Against Women Act, including the protection for Native American, LGBT, and immigrant women. And we will start with
Me.
Mr. Blanford.
You got to tell me about the act. Isn't that terrible? So, I mean, obviously, okay, let's just look at the title, because I don't know everything, you know. But I can say that I would probably support something that didn't, you know, you didn't want to have violence against anybody, you know. But I don't know any more about it, so I'm guessing. See if you want to, that's all I can say.
I appreciate that.
The Violence Against Women Act, that was passed by the House and voted enthusiastically for by my opponent, excludes some women. It excludes Native American, immigrant, and LGBT women. And I'm outraged to think that a group of people got in a room and decided whose mother and whose daughter and whose wife would be protected under a law and whose would not. So I'm outraged that that is the version of the bill. The Senate passed a bill that added these protections, and the House decided that they would pass their own and exclude these women, and I'm absolutely opposed to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've got two more. Do you support H.R. 676, which would open Medicare to everyone regardless of age? And I'm going to start with Ms. Rose.
I don't know a lot about that, but I would be in favor of that because I think one of our basic responsibilities are to take care of people who need to be taken care of. I do think we are our brother's keeper. That's just my opinion. And it would be nice in this country if everyone were able to care for themselves and every child had parents that cared for them, but that's not the case. And I think we have a responsibility to take care of people when they can't or have parents that won't. I do think that's a responsibility that we have. So yes, I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
I think that the discussion, again, is one click up, you know. Are people in favor of helping each other? Are people, I mean, of course, we all want good things for each other, but the reality, the first question that should come to our mind is, can we afford it? And how is it going to be paid for? So here we are, walking around like our rich neighbors with a credit card, and they're acting like they're all cool and magnanimous because they're buying something for us from their credit card. If we can't afford it, how can it be helpful to anybody? And if we're so concerned about our standard of living right now, that we're safe from every absolutely thing that could happen to us, that we have perfect health care, are we willing to indebt generations that aren't born for our standard of living? Are we being so lazy that we can't look for a way to pay for it? We can't look at the idea that balancing the budget and paying your bills, not printing money to do it, is the way, that's what this is all about, because we have children. We have my child right now, if you look at it on paper, she's already bankrupt. So we keep having these discussions about, shouldn't we do this and shouldn't we do that, and that's wonderful. And of course it is. Who doesn't want a new Ferrari, but who can afford it? This discussion has to be one click back. And it really, you know, it's hard because I hate being the bad guy and always saying that, but we have to find a way to pay for things before we talk about all these great things that we're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got three questions here, but they all pretty much get to this main question, which is, what will you bring to the district that hasn't and isn't being done already? And we will start with Mr. Blanford.
Well, representation, I mean, for one. You know, I think that on a federal level, a lot of what we do is to try to keep, at least my perspective, is to keep the federal government out of our lives, you know, and let the states handle their own affairs, because we as a community understand what's good for us and what's not good for us. You know, I also think that I'm probably the only person that really has their finger on the pulse. What's going on? This is what's going on. There's people who are controlling our economy. There's people who are controlling our government, the creation of currency. And the funny thing is that people look at you with this look in their eye like, oh, that's conspiracy theory. No, read history. Just read history. Look at the British Empire. Ask, has anyone ever heard of the term not worth a continental? That's our own history. So you need someone who understands, you know, how things really work, people who understand how governments have worked throughout history so that you can make real, effective solutions. You need to find someone who's talking about what they're going to do to fix things. Quit talking about, I don't care what other people are doing. I can't control that, but I can control what I do. And I can give solutions, and I believe that our solution now is not talking about what we can bring back to our district. It ain't there. We need to talk about how we're going to fix things for our children and make sure that they have a sound currency moving forward.
Thank you. Ms. Rose?
Well, I too would like to truly represent the district. I'd like to address the fact that 19% of the people in our district are food insecure. And when I found that, I thought that was a terrible statistic. So I checked to see what my congressman was doing about this. I thought he should have been addressing that issue. And all I found was that he sponsored a bill to disallow food stamps if a family becomes eligible due to a labor strike. So that was his response to that. The 2 years my opponent's been in office, they have repealed 30% of our environmental health and safety regulations. I will fight that because I have children and hope to have grandchildren someday. I think we have a responsibility to them to make sure that they grow up in a world that has an environment that they can live in. I will represent the veterans. My opponent has voted against veterans. I will represent women in Congress. We're at 17% of women in Congress. We are grossly underrepresented, and I'll represent our issues. Obviously, my opponent, our congressman, is not doing that if he's voting to only protect certain women here or there. And I will help the middle class and the families, and I don't see that happening right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's, I found one question I just want to throw in real quick, and hopefully we can answer it fairly quickly, but I don't want to stop you from saying what you want to say on it. And we will start with Ms. Rose. What is your position on school choice? And I think in that, are vouchers a part of that position?
I am opposed to vouchers. I believe that in a public school system, when one gives certain families the ability to take their children out of that school system, what we end up with are more failing schools. What we need to do is improve all of our schools. And by doing that, we need to fully fund education, and we need to fully compensate our teachers. When I go to a restaurant in the evening and find out that my waitress is a school teacher, I find that appalling, because this profession needs to be respected and needs to be compensated in a way that will allow them to spend their time and energy doing what they need to be doing, which are teaching our children. And I believe that if we're committed to public schools, we can improve all of our public schools and give all of our students a fair and equal chance, and that's not happening now.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford?
I think this is more of a state level discussion. You know, on the federal government level, there is no constitutional authority one way or the other to discuss education. So I think, you know, what you're asking is not necessarily if within the context of Congressional District 1. You know, for me and for my family, we actually are going to homeschool, and, we take our daughter's life very seriously, and I don't need any government or anyone had to tell me to raise my daughter or where she's going to school or what to learn or any of that sort of thing. So, for me, if a school is doing so horrendously that it needs to fail, then who wants to send their kid there anyway? Let it fail. It's part of the system. But if we keep propping up things that aren't working, then people are going to get cruddy products. It's just free market. So, I understand that. Think about it. If you say, okay, well, I want my child to go to the best school because I'm paying about, $10,000 a child, something like that, and you start sending them to different schools, the schools are going to clean up their act because they know that they have to. But what incentive do they have now? It's just like communism. The guy would go to work and get paid the same wage if he sat there or if he didn't sit there. But we need some sort of incentive to provide our children with something that's worth a darn. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Blanford. Now it's time for closing statements, and we're going to give each of you 60 seconds. And this time, we're going to do the reverse order than we did our opening statements, and so we'll begin with Ms. Rose.
First, I'd like to thank you all for being here and listening. I really wanted to spend tonight pointing out the clear fundamental differences between myself and the incumbent. That has not happened, but I hope I left you with an idea of what I want to do and how I want to work to improve the lives of everyone in the 1st Congressional District. And I'd just like to leave by saying one thing as a former teacher. Tim Scott, different places do report cards on their congressman. League of Women Voters, Tim Scott got an F, 6% out of 100. Alliance for Retired Americans, an F, 0. Middleclass.org, an F, 7%. Who's he representing? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanford.
Again, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and every one of you out there are here, and it's awesome. It's in each one of us, in one way or the other, is a leader. We're leaders, and leaders are in this room. I like to think of Americans as this little concept that warriors create circumstances, peasants react to circumstances. And we don't have to sit around and wait for the government to pass laws for us to do the next right thing. We can do the next right thing because we already know what it is. So it really is my belief that it's the responsibility of people like us in this room to go out there and empower the individual and let them know that they're awesome. That if they want to change the world, you look in the mirror. You start feeling better about yourself. If, like for me, if you believe in small government, you live that way. If you believe in helping your fellow man through education, health care, then you go do it. We don't have to wait for other people to make laws and come into our lives and tell us what to do. This is America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank both of you. I really I have such admiration and just am very proud that you're stepping up for us in our district and willing to represent us and try to get our vote. And I think you've just done a wonderful job tonight. So thank you so much for that. And with this, I'd like to close and just say the League of Women Voters and its co-sponsor, the AAUW, encourage you to study these issues carefully, learn about the positions of each of these candidates, and vote for the candidate of your choice on November 6th. The League's website, lwvcharleston.org, has nonpartisan election information, including candidate listings and information on the proposed constitutional amendment. We have information from these candidates. We also have information from the auditor's candidate, both of the auditors, the auditor candidates on our website as well, through vote411.org, if that's easier to remember. Anyway, just thank you so much, because without your vote, your voice will not be heard. We encourage you to speak with the candidates individually this time, and just like to let everybody give our round of applause that they certainly deserve. And thank you so much.